I've recently finished The Secrets of the Nile duology by Isabel Ibañez. Now, there were elements of this book that I liked, but I do need to go on a bit of a rant first, but I will eventually get to the bits that I enjoyed. To give you a quick taste of what this book is about, in 1885, a young woman called Inez, who lives in Buenos Aires in Argentina, receives a letter saying that her parents are dead. Her whole life, her parents have been going back and forth between Buenos Aires and Egypt because her parents work on archaeological sites, but she's never been allowed to go. And with this news that she gets in the letter, she decides to set sail for Cairo to get some answers and to solve the mystery. The genre of this book is historical romantic fantasy. Rarely have I got so frustrated, annoyed, and infuriated as I did. It was a combination of things. First off, it had my least favourite trope ever, which is miscommunication, constant misunderstandings, where the characters lack very basic communication skills, where everything could have been solved if they'd just communicated in the first place. I just find that to be lazy writing. It always makes me feel that the author is just not imaginative enough to think of a way that the plot could happen without those misunderstandings. And different characters are withholding different pieces of information, seemingly only for the purpose of it being a plot device. And without that, lots of the book wouldn't be able to happen. Secondly, lots of really obvious things were telegraphed a long way off. So things which I think the author intended to be maybe a surprise far along in the book were very obvious very early on. And the characters weren't putting two and two together. And when it's to this extent, it just leaves you thinking that the characters are really stupid. And when you know something for so long ahead of the characters, it just feels like a waste of time because you're just waiting for them to figure it out. And with more experienced authors, they do it in just the right amounts. They drop little clues here and there, and you gradually piece them together until you have a realization moment. And that is usually my favourite thing about a book. And with clever authors, you realise it only maybe just before a character realises it, so that you're not having to wait too long for a character to figure it out. And I love to be surprised, but not much came as a surprise in these books. There were a couple of things that did surprise me, and those were the bits that I did enjoy, and that's why I kept reading and what drew me in and made me enjoy it enough to want to read the second book in the duology. The third thing that annoyed me was the most frustrating, because the main character in this is potentially the most annoying, frustrating main character ever. She has the worst judgment and she never learns from her mistakes. I think the author was wanting her to come across sort of vivacious, feisty, but she came across as childish, spoilt, and overdramatic, constantly leaping to conclusions, and the wrong conclusions at that. She didn't seem to have any control over her emotions, and she wouldn't let anyone explain. And in a conversation, she wouldn't let anyone finish. If she just hung on those few moments and maybe asked a question or asked them why, then a lot of things could have been resolved instantly, and she could have understood why people were doing the things that they were. But she just seems to be flouncing around, getting het up and outraged. And I'm not sure how much the audiobook played into this for me. The female narrator for the audiobook, the accent for a start sounded very fake, but it was also very overwrought and dramatic. And if I were reading myself, it might have come across as calm. It always sounded like, how could I not have known? I can't believe it. It's in the audiobook. A very accurate impression there, I think. So I was finding this main character, Inez, so irritating that it almost made me give up on the books. And I found the dialogue between the two romantic interests to be really cringy. The fourth thing that I had a problem with is that the audiobook seemed a bit amateurish. There were quite a lot of mistakes in this one that hadn't been caught by producers and editors. And I wouldn't have minded about this if the book was really, really good and I was really enjoying it. I would have just ignored it. Because I was getting irritated by other things, this was much more of a factor. Just some really unusual, incorrect pronunciations of words that weren't at all to do with the accent. Just little things like, instead of saying primed for action, it was primed for action. Instead of unbridled joy, it was unbridled. Instead of the smell wafting, it was pronounced the smell wafted. I've never heard of that before ever. So I did feel like the audiobook could have been done more professionally. And the accent of the female narrator, it felt very fake and put on. And so that was a bit distracting, the Argentinian accent. And sometimes it was quite hard to understand the words. So you had to work a bit harder. And if you have an illness or disability, that is not good. You're not wanting to use up energy trying to decipher what words are actually being said. But there were bits of this book that I did enjoy. So the setting was brilliant. It was mainly set in Cairo and other bits of Egypt. And I love the setting of archaeological sites and the archaeology side of things. And Egyptian history and mythology is very interesting. So I thought the atmosphere was written very well and it conjured up this very immersive feeling. And there was a bit of magic in this and I really enjoyed that. And although I did figure out a lot of things too early, in my opinion, I would have liked my sleuthing process to have been strung out for a much longer duration before actually reaching the point of epiphany. There were a couple of moments where I was surprised and I didn't guess what was coming. But one of those moments, I had a flicker of an idea earlier and I wished I'd paid more attention to that flicker and thought about it more, but I was just pushing on with the book and wanting to find out what happened. So I didn't pause to reflect on that flicker of a thought, which would have been key to realising one of the big reveals. With this duology, which consists of What the River Knows and Where the Library Hides, I think I preferred the second book. As with a lot of books that I've been listening to recently, I've just merely liked it instead of loving it. And I know that some people love this book, so don't be put off by my opinions, and your pet peeves might not be the same as mine, so you might not find these things as irritating as I did. I'm a very plot-focused person. The bit I love most about books is the excitement of those gradual dropping of clues and being a detective, and those wonderful moments when you figure something out before the book tells you. That's my favourite kind of thing. But if you're just along for the ride and enjoy a romantic plot, then you might love this book. So if you read the blurb and feel like you might like it, don't be put off by my ranting. Maybe I was just in a particularly grumpy mood when I was listening to it. So you never know, you might love it. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it in general.